I will defund federal involvement in policing, including the DEA and DHS. That means ending the supplying of surplus military equipment like tanks and tear gas to over 8,000 federal, state, and local police forces. I will end no-knock raids, which too often end up killing innocent bystanders like Breonna Taylor. And as Libertarian Congressman Justin Amash has brought up, when police do misbehave, it is nearly impossible to take legal action against police because of an arcane doctrine known as qualified immunity, which states that victims can only successfully sue an officer when a clear civil rights violation has already been established in a prior case. When I am president, I will end qualified immunity so that police are held to the same standard as everyone else. While millions of Americans have suffered from government's war on drugs, almost every American has suffered from the COVID-19 pandemic in some way. South Korea confirmed its first coronavirus case within a day of our first case and quickly jumped ahead in testing, containing the spread. As infections in the U.S. skyrocketed, South Korea nearly eradicated COVID-19, and they did it without any lockdowns. A testing initiative that was led by Bill Gates was the first to roll out tests in the United States that could be done outside of a hospital. And over the course of 10 weeks, they processed about 20,000 tests. But on May 12th, the FDA stopped them from further testing and said that they needed, quote unquote, further assessment. This is just one example of how the FDA has worsened the COVID-19 crisis and made it extremely difficult for anyone to get tested. Currently, only those companies with enough money and resources are even able to get FDA approval, and once they do, they weaponize their patents to hold a monopoly. It costs about $1 billion to bring a drug to market, and thanks to the FDA, about a 10-year process. Meanwhile, it's the patients who suffer, desperately waiting for drugs that just might save their lives. New medicines and procedures should get to patients as quickly and safely as possible. When I am your president, I will get rid of the efficacy requirement of the FDA, if not the FDA entirely. The FDA is not the only issue with the American healthcare system. Let's be honest, it's not working for anyone. My heart goes out to the millions of Americans who've been left behind, those families who have been bankrupted. Now, for decades, politicians in Washington, D.C. have insisted it's the fault of the free market, and that's why we need a single-payer healthcare system. Well, I have news for them. We haven't had anything close to a free market in nearly a century. The alternative to our current big government failure isn't an even bigger government failure. When I hear politicians say we need Medicare for all, what I'm hearing them say is we need VA hospital for all. This top-down monopoly is unacceptable for any person, let alone those who are willing to sacrifice their lives for our country. We cannot wait for government bureaucrats to decide who lives and who dies. We must put control back into the patient's hands. As I see it, the biggest problem our healthcare system has is that our insurance really isn't insurance at all. In any other industry, insurance is only there for unexpected events. That's not the way our healthcare system works. Imagine if your car insurance paid for gas, oil, and car washes, First of all, you would have absolutely no reason to shop around for the cheapest gas prices. In fact, you'd probably go to the closest one or the most expensive one that gives you free coffee while you wait, because what do you care? All you do is you whip out your little $5 copay card. And of course, the gas stations have no reason to keep their prices low and to compete with each other, because they simply pass the prices on to the insurance companies. And from there, the rates would get raised. That's exactly what's happening with our healthcare system. Patients have no reason to shop around for the best price, and healthcare providers have no reason to compete on price. So what happens is costs keep going up, and insurance companies can charge higher prices without any accountability, and we're the ones left footing the bill. Now, the best two examples of how a free market system can work are in Singapore and also the state of Indiana, state of Indiana employees. Singapore has had a system in which insurance is what it's supposed to be. It's there for catastrophic care only. And people in Singapore pay about a third of what we pay in healthcare costs. And by the way, if you're worried about a high deductible, their visits, their office visits are only $10 each. Their doctor office visits in total cost less than our copay. And the state of Indiana offered a system that people quickly jumped on, which lowered prices. The VA healthcare system should be converted to a system like the state of Indiana, where the veterans are given control over their own healthcare dollars, and let them decide how and where and when to use them.
Yeah.
Woo! Now, the government letdown of our soldiers does not begin with healthcare. It starts from the time they enlist. There are many who are overseas who weren't even born when the war on terror began. The United States spends more on military than the next 7 countries combined. Additionally, we're in about 160 countries around the world. And what do we have to show for it? In the last 20 years alone, over 500,000 people have died in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Pakistan, including 250,000 civilians. Those are parents, siblings, and children who will never return home. In every election, politicians promise more peace, but they only deliver more war. If I'm elected president, my very first official act will be to bring the troops home. I'm going to turn America into one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. Our military must be trained to defend our shores, but we have to stop meddling around the world and make peace with our world neighbors. Unfortunately, the military budget is far from the only example of how the government has misdirected our economy. The IRS taxes Americans at every turn, and the tax system is so complicated that only those who can afford personal accountants and tax lawyers can even navigate the code. That same IRS that taxes us to death probes every personal financial decision we make, deciding how much we should pay. Meanwhile, the government itself accumulates more debt. Now, you got some politicians in Washington say we should increase military spending, while the other half are saying we should increase domestic spending. So what's our bipartisan compromise? They simply increase all spending. As your president, my veto pen is going to need a lot of extra ink. Runaway spending.